All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming tonight. It's kind of a new thing. We've never had like a designated intentional high school person come and speak to the parish in general. So this is a great thing. And I've known the Olsons for a long time, since I was pastor at Holy Cross many years ago. And back then, Max Olson was, I don't even know, you were probably in like kindergarten or first grade when I left, huh? It was a long time ago. But he's a senior at Marmion, and he's been very active there, and sports and his academics, and certainly the spiritual life there with the things that he does there. And I know his dad real well, and he and I got to be talking one day and mentioned that Max was doing certain things, and I thought, what a great idea to have somebody like Max come and just talk to us from a young man's perspective about things that are important to him. And because that's not often that we hear that, right? And I saw Max later, and sure, I'll come. And so here he is, and we're just so delighted to have Max Olson here tonight, and his parents, Jody and Chris, and just the love of the Lord, the centrality of family, and the pillars of his life, faith, family, fitness, that he's going to be sharing with us tonight. So, folks, why don't we just welcome Max and just welcome him tonight as he comes up to talk to us, huh?
Good evening. I'm going to just try to gauge where I should hold this mic. First of all, good evening. If you couldn't tell from all the marketing materials and that very kind introduction, my name is Max Olson. I am currently a senior at Marmion Academy and soon to be freshman at Creighton University studying business. I belong to the parish down south, Holy Cross of Batavia. And if you caught me during my free time, I would probably be out and about with my friends, hitting the gym. More recently, I might be editing a Marmion athletics highlight reel. Typically later at night, I would be praying. Oh, and I can't forget, spending some quality family time with my two loving parents and dogs. And I'm sure that description is pretty similar to how you all would describe yourselves. To give respect to the privilege I have to speak to you all tonight, I would like to start off by saying a couple of things. Number one, my hope is for you all to walk out those doors feeling inspired to share your story, just like I'm going to do tonight. Because the reality is that every single person in this room has a unique story that we can learn from, no matter its content. I say this because I believe the best way to teach a lesson is to tell the story behind it. That way, people can have their own unique takeaway as a result of its simplicity. While I may be the one with the microphone right now, that doesn't mean I have any less nervousness, anxiety, or fear that you would in this situation. Despite the common fear of vulnerability, the reality is that being vulnerable is worth it. It is even more worth it if you can help others in the process. A man who tries giving up control over every situation and simply surrenders every part of his life to the Lord is not weak. He is taking the first steps of becoming strong. That is why I tell myself, if being vulnerable helps just one person, it was worth it. That was the second point. The third is, I want this experience to be one for all of us. Once again, I may have the microphone for now, but I want this to be a discussion and not a speech. So by all means, feel free to take notes, especially on the topics I might explain in more complex terms. If you don't have a notebook with you, feel free to use your phone. Feel free to step out if it gets too emotional. I promise you there will be emotional and heavy moments during this talk. But I've also tried to tailor my story so it's not overbearing, but I can't guarantee it won't feel that way. When it comes time, by all means, share your own thoughts, ask the questions on your mind, because this is our discussion. And the fourth is, I'm truly humbled by the opportunity that I have to have this discussion with you all tonight. Thank you to Monsignor Deutsch. Thank you, Miss Barr, and the entire parish office. Thank you, Mom and Dad. And thank you to my very supportive friends and Marmion brothers. And lastly, thank you to our entire community here tonight, willing to join in on this discussion. Hold up, I'm going to get water for 1 second. So what's faith, family, and fitness? Well, the short answer is that faith, family, and fitness are the three pillars that keep me standing strong through the hills, valleys, and mountaintops of my life. These three pillars are teaching me to control what I can and accept that there are things that only God can control. My main form of explaining this will come in the form of a story, that story being my life experience. As I share my story with you, I ask that you might keep in mind a favorite quote of Mr. Wakis, one of my teachers at Marmion. The quote simply goes, I am amongst all men most richly blessed. Early in the morning, on July 19th, 2005, I was born to my two loving parents at a perfectly chubby 10 pounds. Promptly after coming home from the hospital, I received the nickname of Baby Buddha from my cousin Ethan. To the likes of that, my mom still frequently reminds me of my two best baby features, my chubby cheeks and big smile. That big smile fit into the makeup of my first words, those being mom, dad, and happy. As a baby, I had tons of happy, joyful energy, and that joy only grew when my baby sister Ava was born 2 years after me on August 7th, 2007. I'm also frequently reminded of the special bond Ava and I certainly had from the start. When my parents brought her home from the hospital, I held her, looked into her eyes, and just smiled. From the moment Ava could crawl, we constantly played together. My parents' home office was much less of an office and more of a playpen filled with building blocks, dolls, and toy fire trucks. As a family, we eat dinner together every night. We spend summers in northern Michigan with cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents, and family friends. As a family, we do everything together. While family situations and dynamics change, your true family is one of the few constants we find in life. Thankfully, my family introduced me to my next pillar, faith. Like many, mom and dad took us to Mass on Sundays, said grace before dinner, and prayed together before bed. My mom frequently reminded Ava and I to treat others how we want to be treated, and still to this day reminds me of our most important value, honesty. Those values are just so similar to what Jesus describes as the greatest commandment in Matthew 22, as he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, and all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And second is like, love your neighbor as yourself. Along with these values, my parents made the great sacrifice of sending Ava and I to Catholic school for the entirety of our education. At Holy Cross, we grew accustomed to daily mass, weekly adoration, and school-wide prayer over the intercom. Looking back to then, I realized that while it may have seemed forced when I was young, I was being given the opportunity to know all-loving, all-powerful, and all-merciful friend who would never leave my side. Without God's loving presence in my life, I don't know where I would be. I don't know what my purpose would be, and I can certainly say that I would not be here tonight talking with you all. So thank you, Mom and Dad. You got it right. Last pillar, fitness. As a family, we have always been active. On fall Sundays, we would watch our lovable Lions inevitably lose and then go play catch or go for a fun run. We played sports like t-ball and soccer starting in preschool. And to build on this habit, I found some desire to start working out for football the summer before I got to 6th grade. Maybe I watched a motivational speech on YouTube, or maybe it was Derek Jeter's book that everyone was reading, but that is beyond the point. I made the decision to run in the mornings. So about every other day, I ran the medium-sized loop in our neighborhood. And every day, I came home feeling like the king of the world, thinking I ran many, many miles, when in reality, I ran 3/4 of a mile in 15 minutes, panting with every step. What I actually accomplished is irrelevant to the most important part of fitness, consistency. Week by week, I got faster, ran further, and worked out more often. And when it came to football season, I went from playing left end and nose tackle, which are the positions that they put the bad kids at, to playing running back and cornerback, two better positions. This accomplishment is what got me hooked on working out. I found joy in the grind of making myself better every day through exercise. I found instant gratification through a daily workout and delayed gratification in longer-term success, such as the position switch. Throughout my story, there are going to be many miracles that I refer to as God moments. The first of which is the introduction of these three pillars into my life. I acknowledge that there are many kids less fortunate than I, and without my amazing family, strong foundation of faith, and my so-called iron therapy, I don't know what I would do. Here's why that is. Being the happy and playful kid I am, one day in the 6th grade sped up a lifetime's worth of growing up. Not necessarily in a bad way, but it is the reality of my life. November 2nd, 2016 was the day that many people in Chicago have been waiting a lifetime for. The Cubs broke the Billy Goat curse after a rain delay during extra innings in Game 7 of the World Series. In that dramatic fashion of the Cubs' journey to winning the most historic championship in sports would be something hard to top. Well, for my family, God said, all right, bet. The very next day, I walked out of school with a smile on my face and pep in my step. Mrs. Borman said she was taking me home because my mom had to take Ava to the doctor's office. I thought nothing of it, so I went back to Borman's house, changed, did some homework, and played some video games with JP for a while. While it was a fact that Mrs. Borman is a great host, she was especially hospitable on this day. I thought it was abnormal, but my focus was playing JP in Xbox. So after I dominated JP in a lopsided victory, Mrs. Borman said we were all going to the hospital to see Ava. Being the ray of sunshine I always aspire to be, I thought positive. She must have misspoke. I remained hopeful that we weren't going to the hospital with every twist and turn as we neared Delano. And when we pulled into the hospital parking lot, I thought it must not really be a good day for Mr. Borman in his direction-following skills. When we pulled into the emergency care bay and saw my dad pale-faced and scared, my mind went numb with fear. I stepped out of the car and embraced my dad, knowing what was unsaid at this moment. After a minute or two, I asked what was wrong, and he told me, the doctors found a lump on your sister's head. I didn't know what these words fully meant at the time, but I thought that it would all work out and be okay. That night, Ava would be transferred to Lurie's Children's Hospital in Chicago so she could undergo a biopsy of the bump on her head and receive the best care from the best doctors at our disposal. I didn't show a ton of emotion because I didn't know what to think, but from her tone in the emergency room and at the tone at which I packed her to-go bag, it was apparent to my parents that I was in what they call concerned brother mode. It was about Ava, not myself. That night, I slept at Borman's, away from my parents and away from Ava. I laid in bed clueless that night, and I prayed in the most genuine fashion. I remember that prayer being like a conversation with a friend. I simply shared every worry on my mind, and throughout the desperation and concern of that moment, I further grew a dependence on the God who would always be by my side. The next morning, I walked into school in a haze. I was pleasantly surprised when I was welcomed by many hugs, teary eyes, and confused faces. My friends and teachers showed a level of compassion that I didn't understand at that age. In a mere day, life turned upside down. I didn't learn a single thing that day. What I did learn was the helplessness of having no control in a situation that I myself didn't fully understand. All I wanted to do was go to Chicago and be with my family. And to escape this slightly dim mood of class, I went to the bathroom. I did my business and washed my hands, and as I threw the paper towels into the wastebasket, one of the more socially awkward kids said to me, "I'm sorry your sister is going to die." Now I include this because I find it representative of the hope that I had. I remember thinking through every possible good ending the rest of that school day. This was a hope felt by our entire support system and everybody at school. On my way out of school that day, someone in the front office gave me multiple bags full of cards, toys, and games for Ava to have in the hospital. and I found that same Chrysler 300, hopped into it, and Mr. Borman drove me, JP, Emma, and Mrs. Borman downtown to see my sister. I walked into Lurie's Children's Hospital with no expectations. I just wanted to see my baby sister and give her a hug. We took the long elevator ride 20 stories up, checked in at the nurse's desk, and walked into Ava's room. I poured the cards, stuffed animals, and hospital games onto her bed and gave her the hug that I had been waiting all day to give her. JP, Emma, and I played with Ava for hours while our parents talked, and she was happy to finally be treated normal after a long day of tests, doctors, nurses, pricks, and prods. Thanks to the normalcy we brought to her, Ava was smiling in a moment that not many people would smile. That night, I stayed with my Uncle Mike in the courtyard Marriott. I did not sleep too well because the hotel was conveniently located next to the fire department. And my body wasn't in the best condition to be pushed to the brink the next morning. However, Uncle Mike and I decided to work out after we woke up so we could just let out some steam. I hopped onto the treadmill and started at a light jog. And given the challenge of life and the mood that accompanied that moment, I pushed myself. So I continued to make the treadmill go faster and faster, and once it got too fast, I fell and cut my knee on the treadmill. Just like the prayer I had said a couple nights previously, this was the start of a further dependence on a God who would always be by my side. A further dependence on working out, keeping in mind that I would still have that God by my side. Furthering to know that we can always make the good out of the worst situations. No small girl like Ava should ever have to endure what came her way next. After another day in the hospital, she was diagnosed with diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma, a cancerous brain tumor attached to the stem of the brain, which makes it inoperable. Those diagnosed with DIPG had a less than 1% chance of surviving longer than 2 years after their diagnosis date, yet that number has gone up in recent years thanks to more research. It is a rare and very aggressive tumor that affects senses, cognitive ability, balance, physical capabilities, and other basic functions that every single 9-year-old girl should be able to take advantage of. Shortly after the doctors ran more tests, and a part of that was watching Ava struggle to walk down a hospital hallway with the help of 2 full-grown male doctors. Keep in mind, this was Ava's reality while the Chicago was having their biggest party since 1917. Yet Ava did not accept this as a moment of defeat. Outside her hospital window were many posters depicting the Chicago Cubs' W. Those W's quickly became symbolic of the mindset that Ava carried with her throughout her fight. Being the stubborn sister she was, Ava made a warrior-like decision to fight for her life. Brain cancer treatment isn't easy by any means. My parents advocated for the best care we could find for her. Every weekday for months after she was diagnosed, Ava dealt with the checkups, physical therapy, radiation, counseling, pricks, prods, tests, tubes, doctors, nurses, and medical equipment operators. And despite that burden, she did it. She kept the same stubborn energy she showed my mom when all my mom wanted to do was comb her hair before she went to school. And she applied that hard-nosed fight against cancer. Acknowledging Ava's fortitude and my parents' advocacy for her, there is another factor that needs to be recognized: our community support. From a charity 5K to GoFundMe to Meal Train, thoughts and prayers, there was no shortage of support. Our family and friends gave their all to organizing fundraising to pay for her treatments. More significant than any treatment in my eyes is that we all advocated for opportunities to make memories with Ava. And from the bottom of my heart, to all of you who supported that, thank you very much for doing that. Ava was granted a Make-A-Wish. She debated over many options, but her final decision was that she wanted to take a dream vacation to Hawaii. Ava's obsession with dolphins, the ocean, and the movie Soul Surfer drove this decision. When we found out, she set the goal for herself to surf in Hawaii. My parents were quick and gentle to talk her down on that one. Ava, once again, being the stubborn little girl that she was, decided that she would do it. She had nearly 50 days to work her butt off in the doctor's office and at physical therapy to get to the point where she could surf and swim in Hawaii. And by no surprise, when it came time to pack for the trip, she packed more bathing suits than regular clothes. And that night before our surf lesson in Hawaii, Ava slept in her bathing suit, not only excited to surf, but also to prove us wrong. Sure enough, she woke up at 6 a.m. the next day for our surf lesson at 10. She certainly didn't go back to bed, making for unrested parents that day. And when the time came, my parents reminded her that she was making the choice herself to surf. She was stubborn and insisted on doing it. The first couple of times she tried, she failed. Then, with the faith that she had in herself and some more pointers from our surf instructor, she did it. She accomplished the remarkable feat of barely walking in November to completing one of the most challenging tasks that she could have done with a tumor on the stem of her brain. That moment in itself was a part of the miracle everyone had been praying for. The memory of Ava surfing that day still serves as my inspiration to use my faith and confidence to hurdle any obstacles in my way. And while her trip was a moment to enjoy with Ava, we returned home to a reality. We soon learned that through radiation treatment, Ava's tumor had shrunk to a remarkably small size for DIPG patients. And the doctor even shared that he was as optimistic as he had ever been about a DIPG patient. This contributed to our hope for the miracle that we had been praying for. Ava's doctor recommended a clinical trial in London that had promising results. Just over a month later, we flew to London. I arrived there thinking that she was going to live, no doubt about it. That was the type of hope that I was filled with. And after being there for a couple of days and exploring London, Ava had to have surgery. Her surgery included placing a catheter system in her head that tunneled chemotherapy directly to the site of her brain tumor. It turned out to be a comprehensive surgery, taking around 18 hours in full. My sister came out of surgery and the sister that went into surgery was not the same one that came out. I did anything and everything I could to help her feel like herself, whether it was sleeping by her side, coloring with her, or playing board games. I did it. This was just one of those moments that I can now see God's hand guiding me through the decision just to be there for her. I need to make that memory of total desperation with her. I can still feel the warmness of her arm and see the purple flush of the stitches in her head as I laid next to her. I remember the warm English meals during breaks from the hospital. I remember going to sleep every night and just wanting to go back to the hospital and be with my little sister. I remember waking up in our flat and getting ready as fast as I could so we could go be with her. And after about a week of this, we somehow got Ava through her treatment and back home. Ava went back to London with my parents to receive her second round of treatment, a bit more than a month after going for the first round. When she got back the second time, she was even more worn down. A short 6 months after being diagnosed, Ava was placed on hospice care. She was at the point where she couldn't speak, and once again, she couldn't stand or walk by herself. She couldn't control her bladder. She had trouble explaining what she wanted. She could barely talk. It was a challenge for us to just communicate with her. So being in concerned brother mode once again, I made a chart with the pictures of the things she commonly needed so that we could communicate with her. Sometimes she would accidentally point at the wrong thing on the sheet and get frustrated that we couldn't understand her. There was no other way to describe this point than just saying that it sucked. She was slowly and steadily slipping away, and it wasn't anything sudden in time, but every moment was unexpected. I had never thought that she would regress this quickly. I prayed every night to God, asking to trade places with her. I wanted God to take her out of her suffering and just let her be a kid, a friend, a daughter, and a sister. I still prayed for a miracle. I thought we would get it. I had hope. On Saturday, May 13th, my dad woke me up early, probably like 6 a.m. early. He said words that still put me in disbelief today. Max, it's time. I took a snapshot of thinking to understand what he meant. I immediately stood up out of my bed and walked to her room. I was still praying for a miracle at her bedside. Ava stayed true to her stubborn ways, and every minute for hours we waited for the time to come. It felt like it wasn't coming. She held on long enough for our extended family to come, sing songs, and pray with us. It seemed that Ava held on to every last thing that she could, yet all things are inevitable. My mom, dad, and I laid hands around Ava at about 11, and minutes later she passed on to God's kingdom. After an hour of mental spiraling and sobbing, my t-shirt was drenched in tears. I couldn't believe that she was gone, and for the first time in 6 months, I accepted the fact that I didn't understand why. Why couldn't it have been me? Why couldn't she get a miracle? And why do I have to lose my best friend? I didn't know why. I wasn't angry at God, and I immediately forgave him. I understood he had a plan. I didn't understand that plan at the time, nor do I know what his plan is now. But I know that like Jesus showed us on the cross, suffering is a part of its fulfillment. So what did I find so comforting in this statement that its utterance alone allowed me to process what was happening? Well, I was 11 years old. I was in the 6th grade just learning y equals mx plus b, and on a normal day, my biggest concern would be my recess football stats. So reminding myself that there was a bigger purpose behind losing my sister continued to give me hope. I had a future of fulfilling what I learned from her. I came to understand this purpose through practice and everyday use of those 3 pillars. To further explain this, I'll scale down the proportions and then blow them back up. Many psychologists attribute the success of individuals to having a productive daily routine. And the main purpose of a daily routine is not to diminish the day's diversity and distinction, but rather set yourself up with constants so that you can process the diverse emotions that one feels on a daily basis. Highs and lows, or valleys and hills, if you will, are what gives every day its distinction. It might come in the form of a very stressful task, relational obstacles, or a negative social interaction. It could also be something exciting, like passing a test, getting a promotion, or receiving a compliment from somebody you deeply respect. The constants of faith, family, and fitness act as pillars in these cases. They prevent the roof of your emotions from collapsing. Throughout Ava's fight, I did my best to keep these alive through the means of a routine. I prayed every night in hopes of a miracle for Ava. As a result, I was filled with an uncharacteristic amount of hope and understanding, especially for somebody as young as I was. Hence the automatic response of God has a plan when faced with the question, why would God let this happen? Those 6 months of Ava's fight were the most family-filled time of my life. We didn't waste a single moment. We made the most of every day because you don't realize how blessed you are until you are losing the things that you love. The memories that we made are one of the very few things I consider priceless. It was 6 months of jumping off Hawaiian waterfalls, dancing on airport walkways, and singing house party at the top of our lungs. I realized it would not have been possible without our support system that displayed pure, unconditional love to me and my family. That is why I see the pillar of family as something more than my blood relatives. It is our friends, church and school communities, Caring Bridge and Facebook followers, and all of you here tonight. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you all, no matter how big or how small. You don't know the immeasurable effect that you've had on my life. Seriously, all of you, thank you. The last constant is fitness. Obviously, I didn't work out every single day throughout her fight, but I know when I felt the most stressed or anxious, I did. Even if it was doing 200 push-ups and a 5-minute plank in the London flat, I used fitness as an outlet to understand myself and work through it. Being stubborn like my sister, I didn't like talking about what I felt, yet I relied on those pillars to compensate and understand. Now, if you use those pillars as a part of your daily routine, you guarantee to better yourself in some way, shape, or form every day. That will only have a compound effect over time. Throughout Ava's fight, I grew a very strong foundation on these pillars, and once she passed, I had the compounded effect of relying on them in the habitual pattern I formed during her fight. I still prayed every day, spent quality time with my family and friends, and I actually became more consistent in working out. I worked out harder in a more advanced fashion, and there was a part of me that felt like I should be struggling more than I was. I wanted to do more research on the process of grief, and given those stubborn Olson ways, I wanted to find a book about the grief for teens written by an actual teen. I didn't want to hear about an adult's perception of what they thought I experienced. I wanted to read something that I could truly relate to. Given that I didn't find that book, the motivation to write a book popped into my head. I can still remember watching some motivational YouTube videos late at night and then going to Safari to see what I had to do. That summer, I worked with a ghostwriter to write the story of Ava's fight, and writing it, I felt like I had the cure to grief. I could picture the book on shelves of airport newsstands with that amazing cure written on the front in big, bold lettering: faith, family, and fitness. The 3 F's, the 3 pillars. I can still picture that dream, but with time, I've lived and learned that it's not that simple. So what changed? Oh, sorry, gosh. Well, I mentioned earlier that I was stubborn like my sister, in the sense that I didn't really like talking about my feelings. When she passed away, I talked about what happened and what other people should learn from that. Yet I wasn't strong enough to share what I was feeling in the present moment in time. With time and enough encouragement, I agreed that I would go see a counselor and to talk. It didn't have to be about Ava or anything else, just talk about feelings. With time, I started to share and feel like I was benefiting from it. Now I'm going to explain the full story. I'm not going to explain the full story out of respect for those involved, but I had a significant moment of distrust with this counselor. And as a result, I myself made an unconscious decision from the defense mechanisms in my mind to not share my feelings with others. Yes, there were other significant factors. Yes, I could definitely shift blame. And yes, it could have easily been avoided, but this event with that counselor was finally thin ice breaking. This was a decision I didn't undo until about a year ago, but in the meantime, I practiced my 3 pillars and was fine. But I thought that admitting my vulnerabilities was the worst thing that I could do. I've learned the hard way that when we don't talk about our vulnerabilities, insecurities, and struggles, there are consequences. As humans, we only become more vulnerable, more insecure, and experience more struggle when we don't talk. My logic of why this is comes down to one thing, and that's control. As humans, we are designed to be controllers. That is why there are apparent hierarchies in society. That's why the concept of natural selection works. And it's a fact that individuals who control their outcomes have the best success in the long run. And as a young man, my worst fear was not being able to fix it myself. So I ran from the reality of admitting that I too had bad feelings, I too wasn't perfect, and I too couldn't magically make everything bad in my life good. I was good at hiding it too. I masked my emotions in that fear and in that control, and in that fear of not being in control. So what changed? Well, the answer is really Marmion. I cannot speak more highly of my experience as a cadet. This is not a pitch to anybody in this room, especially the middle school boys, but it's just the reality of my story. From my freshman year, I came to know what is called faith in action. For the purpose of this talk, I'll define faith in action as an integration of the 3 pillars. I used my faith to treat others like family, and I became an overall fitter human as a result. At Marmion, I was given the opportunities to fulfill the passion I have to help others by putting my faith in action. From volunteering in Special Olympics to doing retreats and service projects, I got to experience and see direct results of doing God's work. I give compliment to Mr. Malkowski and everyone at Marmion because it is structured very well. Not too much at first, but with time, opportunities will come, and the more fulfilling those opportunities are. The structure of faith in action is fulfilled with the senior retreat known as Kairos. If any of you know about the retreat, you know that it's a secret. What is not a secret, though, is what I got to learn about myself from being a candidate and leader for Marmion's Kairos ministry. I learned that truly being in control of my life is accepting that the only person in complete control is God. As his children, we can control some things, but the only time that I can truly be in control of anything is when I'm able to humble myself and say that he is the one with the power. I accept that I have been hurt in my life. I've lost, I've failed, and my heart's been broken. But regardless, I shouldn't be fearful of getting hurt, because in the end, God is at the wheel. The sentiment that I want to convey about control is perfectly encapsulated in Niebuhr's serenity prayer. It goes, Lord, please grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Lord, please grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Lord, please grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Faith, family, and fitness are those three pillars that are teaching me to control what I can and accept that there are things that only God can control. When it comes to faith, I try to practice multiple things. Some include daily prayer before bed, reading self-improvement books and journaling, listening to Christian music, or going to adoration when I feel I need to, regardless of the time of day. As for family, I find that having dinner together is extremely important. More importantly, talking about how my day actually went. Being able to say that I had a bad day, but instead of sitting and complaining about my day, and try to find ways to make my day better. Other good family practices would include going to Mass as a family and being unafraid to set aside work and just go have fun. That applies to friends too. And then when it comes to fitness, my best advice is try to eat healthy, but more importantly, just consistently better yourself every day. Not intensely, not strenuously, and not for long periods of time, but just be consistent. On the same track with control, I would like to talk about forgiveness. And I'll start with this. I need to ask you all for forgiveness. I stand up here as a sinner. No one is a bigger hypocrite than myself, and I'm almost sure that there has been a point or time that I've gone against every single piece of advice that I've shared thus far. And for most advice, I've probably done it more than once. Don't get me wrong, I consider myself a good person, and there is no true advice given that hasn't been first learned by making mistakes. But a big part of surrendering control to God is to admit our faults, to admit that God has the power, and we must put ourselves beneath him. He is perfect, I am not. I relate very much to Paul in his letter to Timothy when he says, quote, Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners. Of these, I am the foremost. But for that reason, I was mercifully treated, so that in me as the foremost, Jesus Christ might display all of his patience as an example for those who had come to believe in him for everlasting life. That comes from the first book of Timothy, of the first book of 1 Timothy in the Bible, if anybody wants it. But let's just break down that piece of scripture. Paul starts out by acknowledging Jesus Christ came into the world to save sinners. For perspective, do you know that if you were the only person on earth, Jesus Christ would still have come to earth and still suffered his crucifixion for your forgiveness? Second, of those sinners, I am the foremost. I can only control what I can control. So I should only concern myself with the things in my control. I can control my thoughts, my actions, and my sin. Since I can't control what other people do, why even compare myself to them? So from that logic, I must be the foremost sinner. But for that reason, I was mercifully treated, so that in me, as the foremost sinner, Jesus Christ might display all of his patience as an example for those who had come to believe in him for everlasting life. Forgiveness is a gift freely given. You can never earn it. The other party has to be willing to surrender their hurt and accept the gift Christ gave us all. I acknowledge that every day I sin, and every day God exercises the patience he has for me, running back to his loving arms. In that patience, we find the ultimate beauty of forgiveness, that is love. No matter how much we hurt God, no matter how many times we turn our back, he still loves us. Control, fear, sin are all rooted in the human desire to be loved. When we chase to be in control, it is because we want to guarantee our own success. And success is really the love that we feel when we accomplish something and other people see it. When we fear we're afraid of being unloved through a direct cause. When we are unloved by somebody we love, ourselves, it is perceived as a double jeopardy in our mind. When we sin, we are chasing things that present themselves as love, but turn out to be a mere band-aid to the love that we are truly chasing. And when we ask for forgiveness, whether from God, people, or ourselves, we accept the other party's unconditional love, and in return, we give ours. Rather than trying to control, treat others as you want to be treated. If you are like myself, you want to be loved and forgiven when you mess up. So when you hurt, forgive. Just like the daily practice of those 3 pillars, forgiving others will have a compound effect over time. You can forgive one person, and that makes them a whole lot more willing to go out and forgive somebody else, so on and so forth. Kind of like that one Coke commercial. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it. Coke bottle falls out of the truck, rolls all across the beach. People can't keep handing it to each other. And then finally, one thirsty kid gets to drink it. It's a great commercial. That just popped in my head. But it's kind of like that effect. It keeps rolling along. If after all that explanation, you still question the idea that God forgives and loves you unconditionally, I say this. Saints are not saints because they don't sin, but because of their reaction to their sin. Simply, learn from your mistakes. I mentioned earlier that I quote, immediately forgave God for taking my sister. After she passed away, I was often confronted by the question, why did God have to take our precious girl? St. Thomas Aquinas, commonly accepted to be the best theologian in all of history, accredits this one question to most reasonably challenge the goodness of God. So why do bad things, like a 9-year-old girl dying of a highly aggressive brain tumor, happen to good people? Aquinas answers this question saying, quote, God is goodness, and there can be no evil in him, and that the existence of goodness allows evil to exist through the fault of humans as a result of the fall of man in the Garden of Eden. St. Irenaeus had a different solution to the problem of evil. He asserted that there is a 2-step creation process in which humans require free will and the experience of evil in order to develop spiritual morality. Perfection is something that comes about through personal growth, and therefore the experience of evil and suffering is necessary to fully develop. Now, I'm no theologian, but it takes a bit of time for me to digest that complex theological thought process. I'm sure many of you are on the same boat. And thankfully, I've been blessed with an education to spend more time with those arguments. But for the sake of time, I would like to talk about miracles, something simpler to the human mind. We didn't get a miracle of Ava's healing, but we got a miracle of the legacy that she left. That legacy includes her stubbornness of getting ready in the mornings with my mom and her stubbornness in the many hospitals that she got treatment in. It includes the progression of not walking in November to surfing in Hawaii, and it includes the many hearts she touched throughout her life. Additionally, I like to reflect on the many miracles of everyday life. I call them God moments. For example, Ava loved rainbows and cardinals, and since she's passed away, it's been a rare sight to see a rainbow. It hasn't been a rare sight to see a rainbow in the sky or one the unusual amount of cardinals near our house, most of which my mom points out. Ava's theme song throughout her battle was Fight Song by Rachel Platten. That song randomly comes on in the most fitting times. For example, The Gilla family is here tonight. Mr. Andy Gilla was with my parents at Royal Country Club, I think about a month ago. They were just talking about Ava, and it just like randomly comes on. And according to them, like nobody else was in control of the music. It was just shuffle, and as soon as they mentioned Ava, the song comes on. One of those crazy things. Another moment, there was a night that I was praying at Holy Cross. I was super stressed out, and I was just asking God for a bit of extra faith in that moment. And a few moments later, I sat down in the journal, and the lights just start turning on and off, like flickering. It was about 10 or 11 at night. Nobody else was in the church. And to be completely honest, I don't think the lights at Holy Cross are supposed to turn on and off that quickly because they're just bright enough that they would shatter or something, I guess. This phenomenon continued until I finished journaling, but none of those stories even compares to this next God moment. For the sake of telling this story, I ask you to think of a person in your life that you consider a saint, just like somebody that's like completely perfect. Generally, it's going to be a very, very kind elderly lady. Just going to be real with that one, because they have the wisdom and experience to be saint-like. So just think of that person. For myself and many others at Holy Cross, Mrs. Glemkowski was that person. She now lives in Colorado with her loving husband. Mrs. Glemkowski was the type of person to be present at every parish event. She worked in the school office and welcomed everybody with the warmest smile you have ever seen. Everyone knows Mrs. Glemkowski kept the most beautiful statue of Our Lady of Fatima at her desk in the front office in the school. Sure enough, after a week or so after Ava was diagnosed, Mrs. Glemkowski showed up at our front doorstep. She stood there with the pouring rain behind her, holding her Lady of Fatima statue. We opened the door, and she said, "Keep this in your home. I will be praying to Our Lady for Ava's intention." Obviously, my mom told her we couldn't accept the beautiful statue from her. She insisted. My mom said the same thing. So we finally gave in and accepted it. Now, it was a God moment of itself because that gesture had an effect on my faith in the form of a relationship with Our Lady of Fatima. But that isn't it. Fast forward a couple hours after Ava passed away, my dad, some family, and myself were standing in our driveway talking. My dad looked down at his phone. His jaw dropped, and he goes, "It's May 13th. Given the mood and unaware of what he was trying to say, we looked at him and gave him a sarcastic nod, kind of saying like, "Yeah, dummy. Yeah, it's May 13th. But then he pointed out the fact that Mrs. Glemkowski gave us the statue and offered her prayers to Our Lady of Fatima for Ava. He said, "Today is the feast of Our Lady of Fatima, May 13th. To this, some tears were shed. Yet, it's even connected even further. The appearance of Our Lady of Fatima began on that May 13th date and continued for exact 6 months until October 13th, which is the same week that Ava began showing symptoms of a brain tumor. Receiving that statue from Miss Glemkowski, the appearances lasting as long as her fight, and Ava's passing happening on Our Lady's feast day seems almost too good to be true, unless there's an all-loving God with a plan for each and every one of us. An atheist calls this a coincidence. I call it a miracle. From my perspective, we are living in one of those God moments right now. As I said earlier about that book, it is still something that I aspire to accomplish. Likewise, I believe that kids and teenagers have untapped wisdom today. In an era that so many kids struggle with mental health and things similar, I believe we need more teenage voices sharing their stories. And one of the beautiful things about social media is that it's a very accessible thing to do. Yet for some people, sharing their stories requires something more formal and for greater respect. Throughout preparation to have this conversation tonight, I found the resources and the motivation to share my story and hopefully create outlets for other kids like me who want to do the same. While I don't know what that's going to look like down the road, I remain hopeful. And while I may not know your story, I know it has the power to inspire all of you. So I ask you to just think. I'm going to play a song. It's called Burn the Ships by King and Country. The song alludes to the Spanish captain Hernan Cortez, who told his men to burn their sea ships as they faced a much stronger Aztec army in 1915. The point was to make a choice and face no return. And 2 years after burning their ships, they conquered the Aztecs. So I ask you to reflect and digest with me as we listen. Remember that you and I, amongst all men, are most richly blessed. And if you feel the courage, burn your ship.
How did we get here? What comes the way on a lonely shore? I can see in your eyes, dear. It's hard to take for a moment more. We've got to burn the ships, cut the ties, send the flare into the night. Say a prayer, turn the tide, dry your tears and wave goodbye. Step into a new day. We can rise up from the dust and walk away. We can dance upon a heartache, yeah. So light a match, leave the past, burn the ships, and don't you look back.
Thank you all. So now is what I scheduled to be a little comments and questions period. So if it's okay with Monsignor Deutsch, I'm just going to do this kind of in an open mic forum. I'll walk around. Feel free to ask me any questions you want. If you have a question that you would like to ask everybody, if you have comments, if you feel the need to, share something that's on your mind, I just ask that you do that. Kind of going back to that idea that I said earlier, I want this to be a conversation for all of us. So raise your hand if you would like me to bring the mic to you. Start there. I imagine it'll take a second to get somebody to raise their hand for the first time.
Mentioned how the Marmion community helped you through this time and how it helped you grow your faith. Do you have examples of where and how that worked for you?
As in regards to Marmion? Yeah, so I would say, at Marmion, we use that term faith in action. And that's really what's called, that's really the title of the service hours obligation that we have. But for many students, it's so much more, and I think there's probably about 50% of our student body, once they get to the required number, we just stop counting our service hours because there's so many opportunities. One really good example is Special Olympics. I know that St. Patrick's was influential quite recently, helping get some volunteers for our track and field Special Olympics that we held. I know Miles Keenan right here. He's a participant in Special Olympics, and it's guys like him that inspire me, inspire our whole student body to go out and keep sharing that love of God, not really in a religious sense, but kind of just showing others that we love them by being there for them and supporting them. And it's really a community effort. It's built into quite literally everything we do. We pray at the start of every class, and we try to integrate that into everything we do. It's somewhat of a mantra, and it sometimes can be overused, I think, in some people's minds. But at the end of the day, it's an effort to go out and see Christ in others.
Of those events that the community supported us during the journey, what stands out most to you where you experienced that community love?
I think throughout Ava's journey, the most influential thing was Marmion held a Mr. Marmion for the purpose of fundraising for Ava and just support her hospital bills and stuff like that. Which that is the beauty pageant / talent show that is hosted by Marmion Student Council every single year to kind of just showcase what the guys do. And then every year, all the proceeds go to a charity or some sort of special, some special purpose. Say that again? Why did I choose Creighton? I tell all my friends that basically it's like Marmion with girls. That's really the only difference. Realistically, when I went to visit in the spring with my mom, I got on campus, and a lot of kids say this when they visit their colleges, but I just felt at home. There's a presence of faith there. There's a presence of community. There's a strong academic business school that I am very blessed to be accepted into. And it's just a good community. It's really what it is.
When you would focus on fitness during or after your sister's time in the hospital, does she push you and like while you're working out? Like in many ways. That's my question.
Yeah, I think there's an aspect to when you are doing something that's very challenging to almost challenge any pain that you felt in your life before. Um, and then there's also a positive side to that. To sometimes I'll be on a run and I'll tell myself, okay, 2 more miles. If Ava got through what she did in the hospitals, the very, very least that you can do is to run 2 more miles, go home, and not complain about it. It's the very least I could do. So yeah, there's a very true reality to that, and I think that's something that I even channel today with something more simple. If I get a bad grade on the test, I can go to the gym and just have a great workout because I might not be in a good mood.
You brought up routine once in your talk. What pillar have you found the routine being best served to advance you in faith, family, fitness, things like that, and maybe some examples of things that you found that have worked for you?
Thank you for your question. I think that's a great question in the sense that they're all different. I think in my perception in the long run, family is the pillar that's the hardest to control. But on a daily basis, I think faith is the hardest one to keep consistent with. There's a lot of days that I'll go home and I'll be tired. And I have the habit of praying before I go to sleep. And sometimes all you want to do is just lay in bed and just watch Netflix or something. But oftentimes I have a mini chapel in my sister's room that we still have set up just because it's a spiritual place for me. So I'd say more so in the last year I've made a better commitment to not trying to pray in bed and just saying one Hail Mary, but just go in there, throw my AirPods in, listen to some music, and pray,
I was really struck by your comment that your response to your sister's death was just to forgive God right away. And so you've had time to unpack that and to think about that. And I'm just wondering if there has been anything that you've realized that led you to the ability to do that. It's kind of not the most normal reaction, right, to the loss of someone that you loved so beautifully. And so, any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and I think that that was really just a result of how blessed I am to have the education and the basis of faith from a young age that I did. There was a line in there that I said, or the first time I introduced the idea of a God moment, and that those introductions are little God moments. I really feel blessed that I had that opportunity to understand that as young as I did. And it's actually a huge credit to both my parents, too. Life's not always going to be perfect, but I got to know from a young age that, just go to God, You feel stressed, you feel anything negative, just go to Him. He's going to take it all away, offer it up. If you need, literally, just lay it out before Him.
First of all, sorry about the loss of your your sister. I come from a long distance, not that far, Hinsdale, but I saw your little, I don't know if it was on YouTube or had your little talk, and I thought, wow, this seems like, for me, I happen to be a father of 10 children. I have 7 boys, 3 girls, a lot of them do college football, and sports I think is really important. When I saw your your little 30-second video, I thought, wow, this would be really, and good to see. But I just think I'm really impressed. It's nice to see someone who's, with 7 boys and the 3 girls, that my kids try to live their faith, but I really think it's great that you get up and speak to all the kids here. And being young, it's not easy trying to live your faith. I just wanted to give you, I had a rosary that I got from Medjugorje, and I wanted to give it to you because it reminded me what you're doing is you are going with the Holy Spirit. And this happens to be a red rosary. I think what you're doing is
That's ultra. From the bottom of my heart, thank you very much. I just gotta thank you. As you were talking, you mentioned that you had 10 kids, and there was about a week ago, I was actually trying to find some motivation to sit down and write this, and I threw on a Kobe Bryant motivational video. And there's a quote that you remind me of. He said in the video, the best thing that a parent could ever do is tell them, no matter if you score 0 points or 60 points, just tell them, I love you. And I can tell just from your demeanor and your presence here tonight that that's something that you do. So I compliment you on that. Thank you.
good job.
What is something that can help you keep on being motivated? You're not feeling up to it.
That's a good question. To be very honest, there are a lot of times where I am unmotivated. I think my friends here know tonight that I do like to relax too. It's not constantly go, go, go. That's just not realistic. But how do I stay motivated? I guess slowly with time, I build that habit, as I said. If you create a routine in your life, you get used to just working, I guess. And with time, you grow accustomed to that. And slowly, you'll keep working more, you'll keep working harder. And it's a continual process. You're not one day gonna be young and just all of a sudden decide to do something super crazy great. But it's a slow process over time, and it's staying committed to what you want to do. So my best advice would be to say this: picture your dream, and every single day, try to think of what you want that dream to look like. And when you feel unmotivated, just picture yourself being in that dream, whatever it might be, doing whatever you want to do. Picture yourself there. Close your eyes. Literally visualize it. Think of every single detail. Think of that, and hopefully that should motivate you. I'll be there in 1 second. My Uncle Mike is texting my father with a question. Oh, Uncle Doug. Oh, okay.
Max, the question is, Max, did Scripture play a role in your faith pillar and faith journey? If so, which Bible verses or books did you find helped most?
To answer that question very truthfully, Scripture is actually something that I find I struggle with the most in my faith. And I would like to point out the Scripture verses tonight that I used. That one, the second greatest commandment is to love thy neighbor as thyself. And the first greatest commandment is to love thy God as thyself. And then also quite recently, the other one that I shared from, I believe it's the first book of 1 Samuel, the letter from, Timothy. The letter from Paul to Timothy. I found that very, very helpful.
So in addition to being a courageous and rather talented speaker and an example for young men your age, you're also a gifted editor, and was wondering if you can't run the Cadet Crazies from Creighton, could you at least mentor the next one to try to continue that legacy? It's awesome.
I'll do my best. That's an ongoing process at Marmion, working with our social media teams. But it's something that provides me with a lot of hope. And actually, to give credit to St. Patrick's and Miss Barr here, they have great social media. Like Miss Barr, she texted me and she said, "Oh, can you send in the video to promote the talk?" And I'm like, "Oh, I can edit myself. Don't worry. I've learned that." And she's like, "No, I got it." And great job. Like, I took it like 20 times. I sent her 2 videos. They were not as good as the one that you guys saw. She clipped out the spots where I wasn't talking, where what I said didn't make sense, and then with the music behind it, and then the same path. Oh, it's just great. So I give credit to that.
I think you should just do this speech again and just record it and put it on YouTube or something, because that was really good.
I appreciate it. Thanks to St. Pat's, I believe they might actually do it for me. I think my dad has it pulled up on his phone right now too, because he was sending a link to our family and stuff. But thank you very much. Like it means a lot, especially from a young guy like yourself. Just because I've been there quite recently too. So thank you.
So, I really wanted to ask what made you go to the school that you really wanted to go to as a way to show the way that to help your lovely sister. And I noticed when you told everybody on the song that came up, how did you went to that school and showed the way that you helped Ava in a way of the family would? What's like the experience of like the way that you helped your sister, and the things that you did was like very helpful, and I was very happy for you and the family, and I just kind of want to know how you helped Ava in a way by showing her the love, the support, and everything you do to help Ava as a way that you showed her the love. So why did you choose to go to the school that you really want to go to show the way to help your sister? What's the kind of reason?
Thank you, Miles, for the question. Well, I guess the reason I went to Marmion was, one, I had a lot of friends going there. But I guess it's, in a sense, it's also just what God had in store for me. Prayed on it. It's what my family said I should probably do. And it just worked out, you know? And that's just the way that he works, simply but miraculously in all of our lives every single day.
Are you like still on the football team, or are you gonna like continue that in college?
So one of the great lessons in life is learning that there are people better than you. So short answer to your question, Creighton has a great club flag football team. So I will be doing that. But no, unfortunately, I will not be playing football in college.
Are you gonna be able to do intramurals?
Yes. So that's what I'll get to do with the flag football, maybe some basketball, you know. I'm more of a Michigan guy, to be honest. Go Blue.
First off, go Spartans. But now as you're approaching, you're ending your career with high school, you're starting to get ready for college, how are you going to, or how are you thinking you're going to continue following those 3 pillars, especially since you'll be away from your family?
First of all, thank you for the question. Half of that is, yes, I still need to think through that a bit. But the first answer is, one, I think faith is going to be very easy at Creighton. They have a beautiful cathedral right there in the center of campus. Like you can't miss it. As for family, I'll have friends there. I have the means to still talk to my friends that I have now and go visit them. But more importantly, I know my loving mom will be texting me every day, and my dad too. They're visiting every weekend. They're gonna buy a house for me to rent out, and then they'll live there semi-permanently, but not so semi-permanently. And then fitness-wise, like the beautiful thing about once you build it enough into your routine, I don't see it slipping away. I think the reality is just keep on working. Keep on trying to make myself better every single day. And I know that there is more than enough room to keep trying to make myself better. So.
You mentioned that you have gone to adoration, and I've had a lot of good things come from adoration, and I was just wondering, like, how often do you go, and like, what do you get out of adoration? Maybe share with us if it's not too bold of a question.
It's certainly not too bold of a question. I think that's a very fair question. My form of going to adoration and praying has evolved over time. And I would say what I've found more effective for myself is quite recently, I don't try and say a full rosary. I don't go and try to force anything. I just go with the intention of literally talking to God like he's my friend, thinking stuff out. And a part of that is actually the physical drive when I go to adoration. I'll throw on some music and I will literally sing my heart out on the way there and on the way back. But once you get there, just talk to God. And very honestly, that's probably oftentimes too late at night. I think my parents know. They'll go to bed and they'll get a text at like 10 or 11, hey, I'm going to church to pray. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't know if I already asked the question, but when your sister passed, I know how you kept your faith. How would you say you did not give in and even in the lowest lows be like, it's okay, God is with me as I'm suffering? Like, how'd you stay with it?
Thank you for your question. That's a hard question to answer. How did I stay with it? I think deep down inside of us, with that beautiful conscience that God gave us, we all know that he is with us all the time. And I think as a result, all you have to do is ask him for the strength to understand that. And if you ask enough, he will give it to you.
As somebody that has gone through loss like yourself, how did you, what is some advice that you can give to younger guys and girls that about surrounding themselves with good friends that can lean on them in hard times and whatnot?
Thank you for your question. You can tell the difficulty of the question with the longer the pause that I have to answer it. I would say it's hard to say that I've ever had to make a decision of which friend group or which friends I would have to have. Some of my best friends who are here tonight, JP, Fish, I have known since preschool, kindergarten, even the gals right there, Grace, Eve, Alex, Molly. Alex and Molly came a little bit later. And then I've known Tully all throughout high school. Jack, we've been neighborhood buddies since the beginning. And I think it's kind of just trusting that God has put the right people in your life. And I think the reason that those relationships have worked out is because together we have been through enough that we can trust each other. And when you go through things with people and you come out stronger at the other end, you collectively, all together, have a positive influence on each other. And it is a credit to my friend group. We certainly aren't perfect in it by any means, but we do love each other at the end of the day, no matter what. And I know that the group of friends that I have right now will be my friends for the rest of my life. So thank you.
Values and not willing to
Also, I have to apologize to Luke. I didn't see him when I looked about the crowd when I was mentioning my friends. Sorry if I forgot anybody else. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, just trust your heart, you know?
Thank you for sharing your story, and thank you to your parents. You've done a beautiful job with your son. You mentioned vulnerability, and I would like to ask you about any tips, suggestions, advice that you have for adolescents to allow themselves to be vulnerable, to feel, permission to feel, and find somebody to discuss that with, of course, God, but someone else. What advice do you have for teens?
I'll give you a very simple answer. I think that vulnerability is something that's very easy to be afraid of. And if you are afraid of it, the only way to get rid of your fear is to just do it, to just make a decision to be vulnerable and accept that there's a likely chance that if you don't get hurt by being vulnerable, you'll get hurt by something else. So you might as well be in control and just accept that there's a possibility. But the very likely chance is that you're going to feel a whole lot better once you tell the world your story than if you didn't.
Thank you for having the strength and courage to share your story. I'd encourage you to continue to do that, whether that's through social media, but especially your book. I believe that you'll write it, and my question is, what do you most hope to accomplish from writing that book, whether that's one goal or multiple?
Thank you for your question. I think my hopes from writing that, well, actually, to be very honest, a lot of it is already written. Whether that be in the form that I have it in an actual chapter book form or just in a notebook with my random thoughts in it. A lot of it is already written. I just have to put it together and make it coherent. But really, what I want to understand for myself is I would like to get a deeper understanding of my own life and myself. I think that there's no end to knowing yourself. and that's certainly an ongoing process, but there is no end to it. And I think that writing a book is a very great means to understand your life. The second is to hopefully create those platforms to help other people share their story. I know at Marmion, I've gotten to hear some stories from a lot of my classmates that inspire me to become better. And I think there is a lot of people who just need a person or a resource that is willing to help them share their story with the world, whether it be through just a YouTube video or writing their own book or having entry into a community blog. I think there is a huge space to be offered and share that type of advice, those stories, not just with other teenagers, but with the entire world. Unfortunately, we are getting pretty close on time. We do have room for one more question, if anybody. We'll go to our main man right here.
So, going with that question I asked before, not in the faith way, but just in the general emotional way, how did you deal with the loss of your sister just in general, without like the faith part on the other side, which is just general thoughts? And do you get what I, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very hard to exclude faith from that answer, but if I did, I would say this. She taught me and my family, her friends, our whole community, a lesson of being stubborn, but synonymous with that, being brave. And from that, you can find strength. There is strength in suffering, no matter what, because in suffering, we find the ways that we grow strong, because no man has ever become strong without first suffering. I'm sorry, I did say one more question. I'll stick to my word. But for anybody who would like to just chat, I'll stick around for probably 15 or 30 minutes or so. I do unfortunately have to take 2 AP tests tomorrow, so I can't stay all night. But I appreciate you all.